diving deep into the mysteries of the cosmos, searching for the truth behind alien encounters, Bigfoot sightings, and all things paranormal. Prepare yourself for a journey beyond the ordinary, into the world where dreams become reality and the night holds secrets waiting to be discovered.
Welcome to Night Dreams Talk Radio with the legendary Gary Anderson. From UFOs to Bigfoot and everything in between, we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the unexplained. Join us for one of the fastest growing shows in the world of the unknown.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the radio, don't let Big Brother know. They're listening to everything, even Gary's late night show. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Show Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
Hi, this is Val Von Torn of Metatron Power and Light. You're listening to Gary Anderson and Night Dreams Talk Radio.
Good evening, my friends. Imagine, if you will, a world not bound by what we see, but what we believe. A world where mysteries still exist and the unknown is just waiting for us. That's the world we're stepping in tonight, right here on Night Dreams Talk Radio. But first, here's Guy with the news.
The strange news in brief. I'm Guy Ticker. Astronomers find rare star system that will trigger a kilonova. The universe has no shortage of oddities, and researchers at the National Science Foundation's Noir Lab have observed another one in the form of a particular binary star system. The system, called CPD-292176, will eventually trigger a kilonova, a celestial event in which two neutron stars collide in a massive explosion that forms heavy elements, including gold and platinum. I'm Guy Ticker. The strange news is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com.
Well, I hope everybody is getting ready for Halloween tomorrow. I know that we got a bunch of candy, but since we're in the compound and we're away from people, guess who gets the candy, JC?
Well, I guess you're going to be eating a lot of candy, because didn't you say that, you don't give out much?
Well, I'll put it this way. In 23 years living down at the compound, I maybe have given out one bag of candy.
Well, I got to tell you,
maybe it's a barbed wire gate and fence and property around there. Nobody can get in.
And then two dogs that look like horses, maybe, too. Yeah.
Well, how about the ones that are big as horses? And how about the German Shepherd? How about the goat that looks like the devil and a couple of horses?
That goat, he runs the show.
I know. But are you going to go trick-or-treating?
No, it's... listen.
I heard about you.
Uh-uh.
You got this costume and you go around with a pillowcase and you fill it up.
As you know, I quit trick-or-treating, even going out on Halloween, because every year something bizarre, totally crazy bizarre would happen to me over the years. Seriously. Starting from like age 12 on. So I quit going out.
Yeah. That's why I missed the kids all growing up. Now I don't get free candy like I used to.
Yeah, I actually had 3 stop here and they get some Sour Patch Kids.
How come you get kids coming before Halloween? The whole point of Halloween is kids coming on Halloween, not a week before.
They don't celebrate. I know, that's what I said, but I guess they celebrate the Saturday before Halloween, regardless if it's a week away. It's weird. I don't know.
Only in Ohio, I think.
Yeah, and actually, that's the first trick-or-treaters I've had in probably 8 years, and I think it's because
that's not true. You know, you were giving out tomatoes last year wrapped in gold foil.
Oh,
you just don't want to admit to what happened to your house the next day when it was all red.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
With
you can't give tomatoes to kids. What do you think they're going to do with it?
They want to pay me back with ketchup. I appreciate it, but no thanks.
Well, tonight on the show, we're going to be talking one of the biggest hoax by the government, NASA, and everything. Did we actually go to the moon? Some people say we haven't. Some people said we have. Some of the astronauts that went to the moon kind of wishy-washy through the years. I don't even know, but I'm on the fence right now. But maybe our guest tonight, Bart, will be able to sway me. Let's find out a little bit about Bart right now.
Bart Sibrel is an award-winning filmmaker, writer, and investigative journalist who's been producing television programs, documentaries, music videos, TV commercials, and stage plays for over 40 years, starting at the age of 18, hosting his own television talk show. Sibrel has owned 5 video production companies, been employed by 2 of the 3 major networks, worked as a television news reporter, and produced videos shown on ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, TLC, USA, and BET. Sibrel has also appeared as a seasoned actor on the stage and screen over 500 times. Articles featuring Sibrel's films have been published in Time Magazine, The New York Times, The Washington Post, and USA Today. Bart Sibrel's awards from the American Motion Picture Society include Best Cinematography, Best Editing, and Top 10 Director. In 1991, Jack Rudell, who was the youngest winner of that award, said, quote, "I was making movies when this competition started, way back in 1930. I do not ever recall anyone entering 3 motion pictures and winning a top award on all 3, but you have." Sibrel grew up as the biggest fan of the purported moon landings, yet gradually began to recognize their unfortunate falsification, largely because of his professional familiarity with studio lighting. In Sibrel's mind, as well as many others, the claim that NASA walked on the moon on the very first attempt with 1960s technology, which only had 1/1,000th the computing power of a cell phone, when today, with 5 decades of better technology, NASA can only send astronauts 1,000th the distance to the moon, simply defies logic. Sibrel believes that a religious attachment to the emotional event is what prevents people from waking up to the deplorable reality. Bart Sibrel has appeared as a guest commentator about the moon landing fraud on The Joe Rogan Experience, The Daily Show, Geraldo, The Abrams Report, NBC, CNN, Fox, HBO, Tech TV, Coast to Coast, and InfoWars. In his memoir, Moon Man, Bart Sibrel reveals for the very first time the official CIA codename for the real Apollo project, the military base where the first staged moon landing was filmed, and the names of 15 United States government scientists and officials who were in attendance for the first moon landing falsification, some of whom are still alive today. This information was given to Sibrel by the chief of security of this secretive military base, who confessed his regrettable participation in this despicable government fraud on his deathbed.
Well, Bart, welcome to the show. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing okay. How about yourself, Gary?
I am doing good. We all thought we went to the moon. But, through the years, again, with my electronic background and with your background and filming and all that, I just looked at the technology of the capability of us going to the moon at that time frame. I just don't think we could have done it.
Yeah, that's true. And the interesting thing, Gary, is that you could say the moon landing fraud is the poster child of conspiracy theories. It's the quintessential conspiracy theory. They faked the moon landing. And when you come to the reluctant and yet truthful revelation that they did, in fact, fake it, what does that tell you about our world? And in the nicely recorded voiceover, the simplest proof that we did not go to the moon is right there. Today, with 5 decades better technology, the farthest that NASA can send an astronaut into outer space is just 1,000th the distance to the moon. So what they're really claiming is, in 1969, ahead of schedule, on the first attempt, with 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone,
Yeah.
they sent astronauts 1,000 times farther into space than they can do today with 5 decades better technology. So what they're really claiming is that for the first time in the history of the world, there was greater technology in the past than in the future. But that's an historic and scientific impossibility, which means it was a forgery. And like the narrator said, if it weren't for people's emotional attachment, they would see the manure for what it is. For example, JFK is probably the second biggest conspiracy. 75% of Americans agree that Oswald did not kill Kennedy. And yet, it's still a tragedy. Whoever killed him, you can change the hat on who did it and why they did it. He's still dead. It's still a tragedy. Or 9/11, 3,000 engineers risking their reputations, right? Their livelihood, has signed an affidavit. It's mechanically impossible for a pinhole airplane going in and out of a steel grid to cause its collapse. Just look at the Oklahoma City bombing photograph. Half the building is blown away. The building still stands because it's a grid. And yet, you can change who did 9/11 and why, but it's still a tragedy. This is different. This is a positive lie. This is giving a screaming child the candy that they're demanding. And now the truth is like taking that candy away and giving them a plate of manure instead. They don't want that. They want to believe the glorious truth. What's the guy's name? Bill Maher, right? I think he does Politically Incorrect. He made fun of Candace Owens' skepticism of the moon landing. And you have Glenn Beck. He has me on the show, and he makes fun of me. Then he has on Charles Duke, an Apollo astronaut who has the audacity to say he's a Christian when his lies have led to the murder of his colleagues. So you have Bill Maher all the way left. You have Glenn Beck all the way right in total agreement. The moon landings are real. In Glenn Beck's mind, I know America has gotten bad, but at least we went to the moon. And so it's kind of interesting. Bill Maher said something fascinating. It's true, but he's directing it outward rather than inward. He said to Candace, if you believe the moon landings are fake, then I can't trust anything else that you believe. Well, the fact is the moon landings were faked, and we'll go into more proof about that. So his scale, his meter, his standard, that if you're deceived about the moon landing, you can be deceived about anything else. Well, that's actually true about Bill Maher, because he's the one who's deceived. And why is he deceived? Because he is a patriot. He says we put Americans on the moon first. Well, Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic in 1927. Imagine, Gary, 50 years later, instead of being able to fly 3,000 miles across the Atlantic, you can only fly 30 miles, 1,000th the distance 50 years later. Or no one is able 50 years later to fly an airplane over the Atlantic. In fact, now airplanes can only fly 30 miles instead of 3,000. Is that logical? No. 50 years later, there were 747s, the weight of 3 houses, flying across the Atlantic. When they blew up the first atomic bomb in 1945, just 10 years later, Because of the advancement of technology, atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful 10 years later. So if we could go to the moon on the first attempt ahead of schedule with 1/millionth the computing power of a cell phone, 10 years later, we would have been on Mars, and 50 years later, we would be in another solar system. Instead, we can only go 1,000th the distance to the moon 50 years later. We had President Ford said we're going to return to the moon in 5 years, never happened. Then we had Carter say we're going to return to the moon in 5 years, never happened. Reagan said we're going to return to the moon in 5 years, never happened. Bush Sr. said we're going to return to the moon in 5 years, never happened. Clinton said we're going to return to the moon in 5 years, never happened. Bush Jr. said twice we're going to return to the moon in 5 years, never happened. Trump said we're going to return to the moon in 5 years, never happened. How can that be? How can you have this greater technology that predates microwave ovens and cell phones that somehow can miraculously go to the moon, and 50 years later you can only go 1,000th the distance to the moon, even with 50-year better computers and rockets? It's so obvious. That's so crystal clear. The proof that they didn't go to the moon, that's really logic itself with no forensic evidence. Logic tells you that they faked the moon landing. If it weren't for people's emotional attachment into the pride or whatever, or let's say they believe in science. I mean, surely the God of science is putting a man on the moon, and they don't want to degrade their God. How dare you blaspheme the God of putting a man on the moon? Well, what did they say about the Titanic? It was the single biggest technological machine ever built in 1912. They were so proud of it. They said it was the ship that God himself could not sink.
Yeah. And it sunk too, didn't it?
And what happened to that? You see that? And then Richard Nixon, when he knew they were not on the moon, said putting a man on the moon is second in greatness only to God making the universe. See it? The Titanic never made a voyage, and they also never went to the moon, just like the Tower of Babel was never finished. This is symbolic spiritually to the fall of man. I believe the moon landings were real more than the average person. I was a fanboy. I had a shrine of Apollo 11 pictures on my bedroom wall that followed me from house to house to house wherever I went. And then I had an open mind. I started looking at the evidence. I had a guy give me $1 million to produce my movies, which you can see for free on the homepage of Sibrel.com. S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, REL.com. And we found classified footage of fake photography of them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they really did actually fake the moon landing. How sad is that? The most powerful nation on earth that claims to be the bastion of truth and freedom is the exact opposite, run by a bunch of gangsters. So my book, Moon Man, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list at Sibrel.com, is interactive with 17 video clips that back up everything that I'm saying, including a NASA engineer saying that because of space radiation, the technology to go to the moon through this radiation field has not been invented yet.
And how can some
How
people
exactly did they go to the moon?
We couldn't have. Just like they keep saying we're going to go to Mars and put a colony up there. Hey, we don't have the capability. We don't. If we had the capability to go to the moon, and wouldn't have the Chinese or the Russians, us, or the Canadians, who knows? Wouldn't they have a moon base on it? But no, some people say, oh, it's on the opposite side of the moon, so we don't see it. But come on, think about it. But when all this was going on, look what was going on, Vietnam. And a lot of rioting and people with unrest. So they had to come up with something to get the American people to pull together. And that was to go to the moon.
Yeah, in fact, we have an eyewitness who saw them film the moon landing a year in advance, the dates, June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968, the location, Cannon Air Force Base. I disclose this all in my book at Sibrel.com. He even said that President Johnson showed up the first of 3 days of filming the fake moon landing inside an airplane hangar at Cannon Air Force Base that they spent 2 weeks building. And Johnson himself came up with the code name for the fake moon landing called Project Slam Dunk, because he said by faking it, we can guarantee its success. And it's exactly what you said, Gary. Richard Nixon said, the biggest threat to the United States of America is not Russia, it's not China, it's American citizens protesting the federal government over the Vietnam War, which they lost. So now you can guarantee a victory, right? You give them the moon landing, everyone waves their flag and they cry and they pray. They had the arrogance to put it on coins, on stamps, in the encyclopedia. They held ticker tape parades. They gave them medals of honor for being such good liars. Imagine your team wins the Super Bowl. I come along and say, look, here's proof they bribed the referees. Here's proof they put drugs in the Gatorade of the opposing team. Here's proof, the weight of their football was, not the way it's supposed to be. You're like, no. We won the Super Bowl. I don't want to hear it. Well, I'm sorry. There's a film called Men in Black 3 in my book. I have a quote at the end of each chapter. And one of the quotes is from Men in Black 3 that actually has a scene of them launching to the moon. And he says, the bitterest truth is better than the sweetest lie. And that's what we have to realize. This is absolutely true that they faked the moon landing. And what does that mean? It means gangsters run our government. Now, my film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, has that footage in it that absolutely proves they didn't go to the moon. Even two NBC news directors and a Washington Post reporter agree the footage proves they didn't go to the moon. They were told not to publish it, not to broadcast it, because it would embarrass the government. So this proof, even my critics agree, is them faking being halfway to the moon because it's so obvious. That's what they're doing, which they would never have to do if they could really go halfway to the moon. They can't leave Earth orbit. And what a surprise, 50 years later, they still can't leave Earth orbit. They said in 2014, by 2018, we will have people orbiting the moon. They were 100% behind schedule, and they only had mannequins orbiting the moon. Now, wait a minute. You can play golf and drive cars on the moon with 1960s technology, but 5 decades better technology, only mannequins can orbit the moon. It's because of radiation. One of the clips at Sibrel.com is them saying you'd have to go through deadly radiation to reach the moon, and the technology to do so has not been invented yet. That's out of a NASA employee's own mouth.
Yeah, but can I ask you a question?
How did they go to the moon?
Well, Bart, didn't scientists try to blow a hole in it with a nuclear detonation at one point to figure it out? Maybe
allegedly, that was a secret project, and they ended up making it worse. They ended up making the radiation worse because all that radiation from the bomb collected. And that's what the radiation belt does. It collects all this galactic and solar radiation from however long the universe and solar system is. And it protects us from radiation, but it also prevents us from leaving Earth orbit. Every manned mission has been well below this radiation, except going to the moon. You'd have to go through it. And so we have this, video clip of a NASA employee saying it's dangerous radiation, meaning deadly, and the technology to go through it hasn't been invented yet. In fact, they sent up an unmanned probe into the radiation with 2 Geiger counters and came back. Well, it's like, why do you need those readings? You supposedly went through it, 8 times to land and orbit the moon. Why do you need those readings now? And I said, well, give me the Geiger counter readings. It's a, taxpayer-funded civilian project. They said it's a military secret. I'm like, wait a minute. The amount of radiation that astronauts have to go through to reach the moon is a military secret. I mean, when they send probes to the sun, is the temperature of the sun a military secret? When they send probes to Jupiter, is the amount of helium in Jupiter's atmosphere a military secret? It's just nature. Why would the thermometer reading be a military secret?
Yeah.
Why would the amount of radiation that you'd have to go through to reach the moon be a military secret? Because if they told you, it would prove it's 100 times a lethal dose.
Yeah, there's no way to shield it at this point with our technology. But, I'm going back to Starfish Prime. I mean, when they detonated that, didn't we also create a lot of strange EMP effects on this planet?
Well, there have been a lot of problems with the Van Allen radiation belt. In fact, Van Allen himself, one of the clips at Sibrel.com is an article that he published. And he says in the article, he's the guy who discovered it. He said it in the 1959 issue of Scientific American magazine that it's up to 100 times a lethal dose. And he says it's going to be an obstacle to leaving Earth orbit. And it still is. How can it be? 55 years later, they still can't leave Earth orbit. The South Pole is here on Earth, and it took 6 attempts. There were 5 teams that died trying to reach the South Pole. The 6th team finally did it. Do you realize at the South Pole, it's 100 degrees below zero, it's 100-mile-per-hour winds, and yet there are bases there. Why? Because it can be done. Maybe barely, but it can be done. If they could go to the moon on the first attempt with 1/1,000th the computing power of a cell phone 55 years ago, you better believe it, there would be bases all over the moon by multiple nations. And that's one of the reasons defenders of this lie say, well, the Russians or the Chinese would have spilled the beans. Well, that's not true. I know someone who works for the Chinese Space Agency in headquarters. And they said everybody there knows the moon missions are fake. They're blackmailing NASA for space technology to give them illegally, against Congress orders, in exchange for not blowing the whistle on the moon landing fraud. Apparently, they have probes that have taken pictures of the landing sites or at the landing sites, and there's nothing there. You see? And the same with Russia. Russia could blurt it out, and then the information is valueless. See, they're being smart. They're blackmailing the United States. And then the second reason why the moon landings must be true is it involved allegedly 400,000 people, if you include food vendors and paperclip providers, right? Well, the atomic bomb involved 129,500 people in World War II. It's the biggest secret. 129,500 people worked on that, and only 8 people knew what they were building. So to say because Bank of America has 500,000 tellers, what a teller knows about the corruption in the bank and the CEO knows are completely different. I spoke to Eugene Krantz, flight director at Apollo. He said that a computer operator in the command center at Houston can tell no difference whatsoever between a simulation flight and a, quote, real flight. It's just a bunch of numbers going by on a screen. So if someone in the command center during the launch can't tell a difference between a real flight and a practice flight, how could we, years later, if we're born after the fact or as a 5 or 10-year-old watching it on TV? Come on. This is a lie that people wanted to believe, and it was actually easier to fool people because there's no independent press coverage. There's no reporters on the moon. We have to trust the federal government that they're giving us real images. And people wanted to believe it. They wanted something to cheer about during the Vietnam War, and they gave it to them. And now I'm trying to take that away and give them a plate of manure, and they are defending the lie. It's so sad. People who claim they're anti-deep state are defending the criminals they abhor by saying the moon landings are real. Because my book discloses homicides of Apollo astronauts who would not cooperate with the fraud. Not my opinion. Their relatives, their wife and son told me they were murdered by the CIA because the day before the homicide, the man who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon told his wife, who I interviewed for 4 hours, he said, Han, for some strange reason, for the first time ever, the CIA showed up at NASA today inspecting the equipment. I wonder why. The next day, he's dead from faulty equipment. and he was a whistleblower at NASA. He would not cooperate with the fraud. His wife told me, his son told me he was murdered by the CIA. So not only did they fake the moon landing, they're violating the Declaration of Independence, which protects us against tyranny for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, what's the first one? Life. They're murdering their own people. Now, according to Bobby Kennedy Jr., who has more access to the JFK files than Oliver Stone, his uncle was killed by the CIA. So he's the expert, not me. So the federal government killed their own president. I think that's election interference by the federal government, not Russia, right?
Yeah.
And then Robert McNamara, defense secretary during the Vietnam War, on his deathbed, he said the whole reason the war started, the public was against it. We said we need like a Pearl Harbor event to get people motivated, because before Pearl Harbor, 90% of Americans were against entering World War II, and a day later, 90% were for it, for wanting to get even. So they created the Gulf of Tonkin attack of a North Vietnamese ship on an American ship. He said before he died, it never happened. Complete CIA fabrication. Congress passed a law based on a CIA lie, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, that led to the death of 1 million people, including 58,220 of their own soldiers, without cause. So if they're willing to kill their own president, if they're willing to kill 58,220 of their own citizens, I don't think they're going to have a problem faking a video image of the moon. That's my rant. Back to you, Gary.
Okay, well, we need to take about a 3-minute break. When we come back, we're going to talk more how they could have faked it logically here. So stay tuned. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. For more information about our guests, just go to our website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. We'll be right back after this break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Sorry about that rant there.
Time slips. A haunted office building on a haunted street. A haunted coal town. Mysterious black cats. Unexplained light anomalies. UFOs, UAPs in the air and on the ground. Bridges in liminal spaces. Cryptids, shamans, and a werewolf. Disclosure: you don't need a ranch in Utah. All this and more happens in rural southwestern Pennsylvania. Coming soon from Haunted Hills and Hollows 1 and 2 author Kevin Paul, Politics and the Paranormal in Greene County, Pennsylvania. Available this fall on Amazon and at other fine booksellers. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
Yeah, it would help if I push that phone button. Well, again, if we really think about the mood, how could they have actually got away, with putting all this where people actually thought that what they were seeing was being from the moon. And was it all done on a soundstage? Some people say it was done in certain parts of the desert. What have you came up with?
Well, Apollo 11 was filmed at Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis, New Mexico, according to the chief of security. His name was Cyrus Eugene Akers. And as he was dying, he confessed, first of all, fearing, I guess, God. And the Bible does say if you confess and renounce your sin, you're forgiven. He told his son, I want to confess I'm a murderer. I murdered somebody. And his son is shocked. Who did you kill? And he says, well, I killed a coworker at Cannon Air Force Base in 1968. His son brings in the military police to investigate so that the victim's family can have closure. Maybe he just disappeared, however the military does it. They got the details on who this person was, and then they asked him, why did you kill him? And he said, well, we both eyewitnessed them film the first moon landing on a fake lunar set, June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968, a year and a month beforehand. And President Johnson was there, and I stood beside him. He was there for the first of 3 days of filming. My friend, coworker, thought it was morally wrong. He was going to tell the public. And so I killed him to keep it a secret. And that's an odd thing to be making up as you're dying, that you're a murderer and that the reason you did it was to cover up the moon landing fraud. Well, my father was in the Air Force, and I lived in or at Air Force bases the good part of my childhood. I never heard of Cannon Air Force Base. I had to look it up. It's tiny, which is great because there's fewer eyewitnesses. And then every branch of the military has its special ops intelligence division. The Marines have it, the Army has it, the Navy has it, and the Air Force has it. Well, guess where it's located? At Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis, New Mexico, the Special Operations Wing of the Intelligence Division of the United States Air Force. That's where the first moon landing was filmed. Later, moon landings may have been filmed in England. I'm not sure. The fact is they never went. If you go to Sibrel.com, S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, R-E-L, Sibrel.com, on the home page, you'll see a 3-minute video called The Moon Landing Fraud in 3 Minutes. You can prove that the moon landing is fake with one photograph. If you go outside and stand in a parking lot or your front yard on a cloudless, sunny day, 2 trees, 2 telephone poles, 2 people, their shadows will always run parallel with one another. It's impossible for their shadows to intersect because the sun is about 1 million times bigger than the earth, and it's going to cast shadows in the same direction over an entire continent or moon. The moon is supposed to be 20 times brighter than the earth because it has no atmosphere. So the last thing you're going to need is electrical lighting to supplement your photography. So in a picture I have at Sibrel.com on the homepage, you'll see an astronaut shadow going at 12 o'clock and a rock, alleged moon rock, 5 feet away. The shadow is going at 9 o'clock, a 90-degree difference from objects 5 feet apart. Take it from a filmmaker whose job for 40 years has been to make fake scenes look real. That is shot with electrical lighting, which means they're on Earth, which means they didn't go to the moon. And we have Apollo 11 faking right in front of your eyes using a 1-foot model of the Earth. The lights come up and they claim the Earth is floating in space and it ends up being a 1-foot model of the Earth. They are faking being halfway to the moon. And in addition to that, we have a secret track of audio on this unedited reel that says do not show to the public at the head of it, of the CIA secretly prompting the astronauts not to answer questions from NASA until they first count off 4 seconds to create a fake radio delay, to make it appear that they're halfway to the moon when in fact they're still in Earth orbit and remained in Earth orbit the entire time. And here we are 55 years later and they still cannot leave Earth orbit. One of the clips at Sibrel.com is a space shuttle astronaut saying, "We hope to eventually go to the moon." He says right now, Earth orbit is as far as we can go. That means with 55 years better technology, Earth orbit is as far as they can go. And he says, the moon, Mars, we hope to go to those places eventually. Well, there's 2 admissions now from NASA that they did not go to the moon. And now you have people who claim to be anti-deep state political leaders who are afraid to expose that the moon landings are fake. To me, if I wanted to bring down corruption in the federal government from day one, I would say, look, the moon landings are fake. The CIA killed Kennedy, and here's what happened on 9/11, and here's this, that, and the other. Are you for me now against this corruption? You see, bring them down from day one.
The problem is, Bart, if they ever came out and told the truth, then you got a population will never believe what the government tells you again. That's the whole problem. Just like, when it comes to like UAP disclosure, UFO, flying discs, or whatever, again, they have put so much disinformation and other information in it to keep it muddied. And if they ever come out, and that's what all these people, I've been hearing this, I've been doing this 54 years, talking about UFOs and talking about all the alternative talk radio. And I've been hearing it from people, next month, the next president, the Congress, this, for 54 years, we haven't got really anything more than a circus put on with Congress. They put on this little thing about disclosure, and it's all hearsay. Again, you think the government's going to come out and tell the American population, we never went to the moon, we faked it?
Well, there could be, outsider or person somehow of integrity who sends the president that somehow wants to be their own person, whether it's Trump or Kamala Harris. They could disclose the moon landing fraud and say, look, we're gonna start fresh. People don't trust the government now. Maybe they will trust the government if they admit their faults. You see, Kennedy was so popular because he admitted his faults all the time. That was my fault. I was wrong.
But he got killed.
Yeah, but the point is, someone could come forward, confess that Kennedy was killed by the CIA, disband the CIA, confess the moon landings were fake, and then the people may trust the government again at that point, trust the new government at that point. We need to go back to simplicity of government, and this is proof that it has gotten out of hand. They always say, give an inch, they'll take a mile, and that's the federal government that's right now spending 70% more revenue than they take in year after year, month after month, day after day. I don't know how long I would live doing that. I've already maxed out my credit cards. I guess I have done that.
Well, I tell you,
and now it's taking a third of my income to pay that off every month.
But if you did it and I did it, to the point what the government did, we'd be locked up in prison to the day we die. You know that.
Well, yeah, that's a true saying. I'm sure you've heard it. When something is illegal for an individual to do, but legal for the government to do, that's the perfect example of tyranny, and it is. Slavery is illegal. I can't enslave you. I can't put a chain around you and say, cook these hamburgers for me. But if the government says, we want you to go and fight in this war, you have no choice. And if you don't, we're going to throw you in jail. That's indentured servitude, isn't it? Isn't that illegal according to one of the constitutional amendments? Slavery is illegal, and indentured servitude is illegal according to the Constitution, except when the government does it. I mean, come on, give me a break. And when you find out that the government is murdering people to cover up the moon landing fraud, you see, there's a lot of people they killed, and yet it's probably fewer people than they killed to cover up the Kennedy assassination. Some people say they killed 200 people to cover that up. I know of maybe 15 people who were killed to cover up the moon landing fraud. And yet this is the one that is the linchpin, the finger out of the dike, the key to bringing down the deep state. Some podcasters are afraid to admit that they believe the moon landings are fake. And yet, according to NBC, there were 2 news directors I showed this footage to, which you can see at Sibrel.com, that convinced me they actually did fake it. I mean, I wanted to believe it was real. But when you see them faking being halfway to the moon, dated 2 days into the flight, and there's Neil Armstrong, and there's a track of audio of the CIA telling them to fake a 4-second radio delay, what can you say? They did fake it. That's why the shadows intersect. That's why they can only go 1,000th as far now. That's why the guy said he killed somebody and it was filmed at Cannon Air Force Base. So we need to make our country correct. And then one news director refused to broadcast it. Do you realize I showed him this footage that's in my film? A funny thing happened on the way to the moon, which was financed by a board member of a company that builds rockets for NASA, who knows it's fake. He gave me the money to expose it. He said, I will not broadcast this footage because it will cause a civil war. 10 years later, a new NBC news director gets it. They fly me to New York, put me up in the Waldorf Astoria. They say, we're going to break this story nationwide. The moon landings are fake. They get a threatening call from the government. Well, the first newscaster, the first news director at NBC, he said it would cause a civil war. It would be the one thing, like you said, if the truth comes out, they'll never trust the government again. You want to bring down the deep state? Really? Then prove and make the moon landing fraud truth come out, because people will go, that's it. I'm done with the federal government. And that attitude should have been a long time ago. The media is the one who should be prodding the public to end corruption, but instead they're running cover for the people doing the corruption. They're the ones who said Oswald did it. One of the clips at Sibrel.com, again, my book Moon Man, which goes into all this detail, one of the clips is Dan Rather describing for the public the Zapruder film, which they didn't broadcast until like 12 years later. Well, I have it synchronized with the Zapruder film, and he says in the third fatal shot, Kennedy's head goes violently forward. Well, it goes violently backward. He says the exact opposite of the truth on November 24th, 1963. So they're running cover for the corrupt people who are Americans, right, who killed Kennedy. They have a 1,200-page document that says Oswald did it, just like they say they have all this proof that they went to the moon. Well, so what? What do you expect them to say? Of course, they're going to, claim these lies, but that's the linchpin. Maybe the truth will come out. You have to imagine what would happen if the truth came out. I think it would be a refreshing moment for mankind, and especially Americans, to realize, look how far we have fallen. When I popped in that tape that said, don't show to the public, and I see them faking being halfway to the moon, dated 2 days into the flight with Neil Armstrong on camera, with the CIA tell him to fake a 4-second radio delay, I just wept. I'm like, oh my gosh, they really did fake the moon landing. How sad is that? And we have this great knowledge. People don't realize this. Faking the moon landing is more profound than if they had actually gone. Do you realize that, Gary? If they went, planted a flag, came back, well, that was a close one. Boy, I'm glad we survived that. But the lying about it, the murdering people to cover it up, the embezzling $250 billion by the most powerful nation on earth that claims to be the most noble, that is so much more profound than if they had actually gone. And that's a fact. They did fake it.
Well, isn't it kind of strange, too? We actually destroyed all our capability to go back to the moon. I mean, look what we did with the rockets.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the clips. We have a NASA astronaut saying, I'd like to return to the moon, but we destroyed that technology.
Yeah.
Now, why would you do that? I mean, if you're going to destroy any technology, you might consider doing the atomic bomb after World War II. Okay, we're going to destroy the blueprints. We don't want to go there ever again. But just 10 years later, atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful. So they intentionally destroyed all the technology, all the schematics, all the hardware, because you could prove it didn't even have enough fuel to leave Earth orbit. Because Elon Musk says to go to the moon today, which should be more efficient, you need at least 8 fuel trips first. There's a recent TED talk that says you might need up to 24 fuel trips first. We found von Braun's original calculations, and he said that the Saturn V weight compared to the weight of a rocket that would need to go there in one trip was a little bit of a difference of 30,000%. Yeah. He said you'd have to have 3 rockets weighing 800 tons. 800,000 tons, sorry, 800,000 tons to go to the moon, and the Saturn V was 2,500 tons. You see, a difference of 30,000%. He says these numbers are irrefutable. That's why they destroyed the technology. You see, the B-52 has been around for 70 years. They still use it. Nothing works better. If they really went to the moon, spent an equivalent of $250 billion to do it, the last thing in the world they would do would be to destroy that investment. However, if they perpetrated a fraud, that's exactly what they would do. So the fact that they destroyed everything, all the hardware, all the schematics, all the original videotapes, all the original telemetry data, intentionally out of their own mouths, is proof of the fraud. Because if you really went, you would never do that. And if you did a fraud, that's exactly what you would do.
Get rid of the evidence.
Right there.
Get rid of the evidence. But here's another thing. You have people like Buzz. He makes remarks. 1 minute, like, well, we never went to the moon. 1 minute, yeah, we went to the moon. Well, again, have you ever talked to him or any of these people?
Several times. I did a follow-up film called Astronauts Gone Wild, which includes the famous time I asked him to swear on a Bible that he walked on the moon and he punched me.
He punched you?
Yeah, he punched me. It's a famous internet viral clip.
Wait a minute. Like, pow, right in the old kisser?
That's right.
Right to the moon?
Yes.
Okay.
He punched me when I confronted him about the moon landing fraud, because we have the tape that he was part of. He's on camera and operating the camera when they faked being halfway to the moon. And we have an Astronauts Gone Wild, which you can see for free at Sibrel.com. We show him the footage. He says, well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Talk to NASA. They're the ones who did it. And then he says him and Neil Armstrong were just passengers. You see, not pilots. They were just orbiting the Earth for 8 days as passengers. Then when he realized he made two admissions that I was correct, he threatened to sue me if I showed that interview to anybody with. It's right there at Sibrel.com. Recently, I found out this morning, he said, he endorses so-and-so for president of the United States, and God bless America. Well, let me tell you, Buzz, who told me privately that he believes in God. The James chapter 2 says, even the demons believe in God, but it doesn't save them. You see, repentance is your part of salvation. God is not going to bless the United States of America when they lie about mankind's greatest accomplishment and when they murder their own employees to cover it up. So, you want God to bless America? Confess that the moon landings are fake. Stop being a hypocrite, like I have to work on every day.
Now, have you been harassed by the CIA or any deep state government agencies? Have they come after you? Have you ever been scared of your life, Bart?
Yeah, you should have read the book there, Gary, but maybe afterwards you can. I go into enormous detail how when I found the tape that proves that they never left Earth orbit, I was followed by somebody after, church that night, and they disabled my car. I was literally being chased on foot in the middle of the highway at night. I took a cab from Nashville to CNN. When I'm trying to get the tape of the proof that we didn't go to the moon, in the back door at CNN, I'm surrounded by government agents who kidnapped me and drugged me with what I presume is truth serum. I first threw up all over the place, and then they asked me a list of questions they had prearranged, and I told them everything they wanted to know. I was in La La Land. I escaped their custody. I made my way back to Nashville, and I peed in a cup. And I said, I got him. I told the NBC News director, I got him. I got truth serum in me, and I'm going to prove that they kidnapped a reporter on the back door of CNN before giving incriminating evidence to be broadcast, maybe back when CNN would do it. And I gave it to a friend to put in a lab in his name, trying to, get away with them not finding out I was doing this. And my friend gets back, and I said, well, what are the results? He says, well, there was a problem at the lab. And I'm like, well, what problem? He said, well, they had a break-in over the weekend. And I said, well, so what? He says, well, funny thing, the only thing stolen was your urine sample. So the people in the lab are like, we don't know who you are, but please take your business elsewhere. So all this I go into great detail for the very first time, including showing this footage. Astronauts Gone Wild is basically I arranged interviews with astronauts and I showed them the proof that they didn't go to the moon. One of them threatened to shoot me, one of them kicked me, one of them punched me, and one of them kicked me from behind. And in the commotion, I leave a very high quality wireless microphone on him. And in the commotion, my camera guy, he forgets to hit stop record. So
Uh-oh.
while the camera is in the back seat of the rental car outside of this guy's Florida, home where we went to interview him, we're unintentionally recording the private conversations of him and his son in his house with the door closed. And they say, quote, "Do you want us to call the CIA and have them whacked?" We have it on tape.
Now,
And so why would the CIA have to be called to kill me if I'm some silly person who thinks we didn't go to the moon when we really went? Because I have proof, I have an eyewitness who saw them fake it at Cannon Air Force Base and said so. When talking to his son to confirm that information, a couple of days later, CIA agents show up at his house and threaten to kill him and his family for ever talking to me ever again about the moon landing fraud that the guy's father participated in. This was only a couple of years ago. The White House press secretary was involved in whistleblower protection for this guy. The United States Senate Intelligence Committee was involved, and so was the FBI 2 years ago because of me and my book and my eyewitness who saw them film Apollo 11 at Cannon Air Force Base a year in advance. So all this is detailed greatly in the book at Sibrel.com, which is in audio that I read myself, Kindle or print, and I just came out with a book about aliens because von Braun, the Nazi moon faker, said before he died, his deathbed confession was that the federal government is planning on faking an alien invasion. So if they wanted to keep something a secret, they would disclose nothing. So the fact that they're disclosing something means they want you to believe it. Why do you think this guy's going around the news media lately saying, UFOs are real and aliens are real? And when pressed on the issue, they said, well, did you see them? He says, well, no, but someone told me they saw them. And I'm like, I can't believe Fox News considers that news, right?
But I'm
Someone
going to
told
say,
me the moon landings were fake. That they don't have me on to say that.
but you know what? It's not just him. It's a lot of people. Here's the whole point. Without proof, we want proof, but we have not really got any proof in all these years. Like I said, 54 years covering these type of subjects. And yet we have no more proof other than hearsay. And that's all we have is hearsay. Like, we have alien bodies. The government's going to false flag. Dr. Greer's been on my show. He talked about the false flag. I mean, disclosure is going to happen, by the way, next week. Well, how many years go by?
I'm going to assume that guy is sincere, but sincerely wrong, because Stephen Greer says the moon landings are real. Get this. If he can't tell the difference between a real and fake moon landing and believes the opposite of the truth, then I say what he believes about aliens is the opposite of the truth. And you know what his number one proof is that aliens are real? Get this, Gary. The Apollo astronauts told him so.
Yeah.
So Stephen Greer thinks the moon landings are real when they're fake. And his number one source that aliens are real is the lying Apollo astronauts told him so. You see that? And von Braun said they're going to fake an alien invasion. So I'm going to assume he's sincere, but sincerely wrong.
Well,
and they want us to believe in aliens because, according to von Braun, they're going to fake an alien invasion.
Well, one thing
I have a book about that called Aliens from Planet X, also at Sibrel.com and audio, Kindle or print. And I talk about a rogue planet that may come by the Earth, and then they'll claim that aliens leaped from the planet to Earth like a spaceship, when in fact there's no life on that planet at all. And these entities have been here all along. According to the top two UFO researchers, Jacques Vallée and I think Hynek is his name, that UFOs are real, but they're not from outer space. they're from Earth. And that's the top two researchers, decades of experience. UFOs are real, but they're not from outer space. They pointed radio telescopes all around the universe for 50 years, not a single radio transmission. We're alone. What a surprise. The exact opposite of what the government wants the public to believe. You see that?
Yeah, but one thing I'll say, because our time is almost up, I've been also, besides behind the microphone for 54 years, ever since I was a kid, I've been in photography. I also done photography professionally. And here's the whole point. When they were on the moon with their Hasselblad, taking all these beautiful moon pictures, right? With their camera. That film, if you know anything about photography and film, there's no way they could have protected it. It would have been gone. The radiation, they would have never had these pictures.
And the temperature is about, if they were on the moon, would be about 100 degrees greater than what would be necessary to destroy the film, to melt it.
Yeah.
And so there's allegedly what's his name, Eugene Cernan, who I interviewed, also an astronaut's gone wild. He allegedly has a photograph of him and his family laying on the moon. Well, that paper itself would have been burned up at 150 degrees, and the moon is 250 degrees. So there can't even be a print of a picture of the type of film they had back there laying on the surface of the moon. That's not possible if you're really on the moon, right? So the fact that it's there and not damaged is proof that they're not on the moon. You know, and then if I may conclude, the smartest AI in the world just said the moon landings were fake. It analyzed pictures from the Chinese probes. It said they're real on the surface of the moon, and analyzed the Apollo pictures. It said every single one of them was fake, the latest AI. And this story is being suppressed. It's not even covered by RT when Vladimir Putin was there being shown the results, which I have a video of at Sibrel.com. He looks not surprised at all.
Again.
And yet they're not even covering the story because they're blackmailing the United States.
Yeah, Bart, I want to thank you for taking the time coming on tonight. And again, your books, go ahead and tell the people where they can find your books and your website again.
Yeah, the book, Moon Man, The True Story of a Filmmaker on the CIA Hit List, is in audio, Kindle, or print. And Aliens from Planet X, they're both at Sibrel.com. S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, R-E-L, Sibrel.com.
Interesting. Well, you have a great weekend that's coming up. And are you going to be giving out candy tomorrow night?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I guess I won't send my producer over to get some candy. Well, hey, Bart, you have a good one. And again, thank you so much for being on. Okay?
Likewise. Take care.
Okay. Well, who do we have tomorrow on, JC?
Well, tomorrow we have Steve Asher on. It's our special Halloween show, and we're going to be talking about ghost stories. His personal experience with ghosts. He worked in prisons, haunted prisons, and they were haunted when he was working there.
And then on Friday, we have, what, 2 guests?
Oh, it's a Quinella, a daily double. We start out with Stanley Milford. He is known as the Paranormal Ranger. Gary, he was a ranger for many years. Him and his partner, they were like the X-Files on the reservation. They have seen and investigated UFOs, cryptids, ghosts, you name it. They even had pennies appear from nowhere, or coins appear from nowhere like Marquise did.
I wish I would get a whole bunch of quarters dropping from my ceiling. You know that.
Antique ones too. Yeah,
well, with silver in it.
Yeah. But,
yeah. No, I did. So far, no money has dropped from the ceiling.
None yet. But yeah.
Who's our second guest, though?
Yeah, our second guest is going to be world-renowned Kevin Randall is going to be coming on talking about Roswell. He is one of the leading researchers, if there ever was one, on the Roswell incident. So if anybody knows, he would know what's happened.
Did we go to the moon? What's your feeling?
You want people to know.
Yeah, well, you're going to have your house egged tomorrow. I mean, seriously, do you think we went to the moon?
I don't think so. He brought up a good point too. You know how film can't last, where the one astronaut shows a picture of his family, where his picture laying on the moon, and he left it there. Could that even be possible?
I don't think so. But here's the other issue: is the radiation would fog that film, and if you even saw the camera setup that was done, I don't think they could have shielded the way that camera, if you look at it there in the pictures, could have been
Well,
shielded enough to not fog the film. The film would have been fogged. It would have been useless.
and here's the thing: those cameras were on out. They're listen. They weren't. They couldn't have protected the film that was in. They was outside in front of them on their chest. You know,
That's what I was saying. Even
yeah,
in the capsule, when they were taking pictures out the window,
exposed. Yeah.
yeah, the radiation would have fogged the film.
Yes. There's so many things that's wacky.
Well,
And
maybe we're, again, keep talking about maybe something happened back a few years ago when they were doing some experimenting with a collator that maybe it flipped us into a parallel universe. And that's why all these effects are going on. Maybe we're going back and forth. I don't know. I'm just a talk show host. I don't know anything.
is that why they've been telling me for about 10 years now that the Monopoly guy didn't have an eyepiece when I used to carry one on my lucky shirt when I won that daggone Monopoly championship in the early 80s? Are you kidding me?
I don't know. But again, a big shout out to, well, we had Barb out there tonight. We've had a couple of people, X out there, and all the people on chat. Again, I want to thank you for tuning into the show. Please leave a comment after the show. That's very important. And give us a thumbs up because our sponsors look at that and that helps pay the bills. Well, till tomorrow night, everybody have a good one. We're going to catch you on the other side, but it might not be the moon. I don't know. But so everybody have a good one. You take care.